Hello, welcome to one more Thursday. And on Thursdays, we do our fertility voices. And today we have a very special guest. Sarah Banks is going to talk to us about her journey to conceive, which has been a bit challenging as it's similar to so many of us. But Sarah is also going to tell us about what she's been doing and how she has used her experience to empower other people who are also trying to conceive. Hi, Sarah. I'm going to bring you in. Hi, Sarah.
Hello, how are you doing?
I'm okay. Thank you so much for being here today with us.
Oh, it's okay. Thank you for inviting me. It's lovely to chat with you.
Yeah, so we've been doing so many things together with the European Fertility Society, the awards and everything. But, with the pandemic, I feel we haven't actually been together for so long, isn't it?
I know. I think it's probably 2 years since we've seen each other in person, isn't it? When we were down for the fertility forum, I think that's the last time I
Yes.
saw you. So it's been far too long, and hopefully we can meet up in person again soon.
Yes, hopefully it will be soon. And
Yeah.
Sarah, on Thursdays, we are doing these fertility voices on Instagram. We want to bring the voices of people who have been struggling to conceive and those who are doing an amazing job helping those who are struggling. And I felt that I had to bring you because you had such an incredible story and you're doing such an amazing job as well, helping other people. Would you like to start by telling us a bit about your journey and where it all began?
Yeah, of course. So I've been with my husband since we were 18. So we grew up in the same village. So we've been together a long time. We got married when we were 25, and it was probably about a year later we decided we'd start a family, or hopefully start a family. And like most people, we just assumed it would happen straight away. Um, we didn't know of anybody who'd had any problems, and we just thought the same would happen for us. So I'd been on the pill for a long time. I came off it, and the first month I was late and thought, oh, brilliant, we're one of the lucky ones that it's happened to straight away. But it wasn't, and it was the start of a very long journey for us. I think it was probably after about 3 years we went to the doctor. I don't know why we waited so long. I think part of it is probably we didn't know anybody else, and we just thought timings weren't right and things like that. And I just think we didn't really know any different. And that started the process of being referred to our local unit. There was a year-long wait at the time, which just seemed to take so long. During this time, so many of our friends had babies, and it was just getting harder and harder. We really felt like, I think we were the first out of most of my friends to get married, and everybody else was starting to have children around us, and it just got so difficult. I remember being sat with two friends at a barbecue who were sat either side of me, both pregnant, talking about like the symptoms and complaining about it and just being so upset. I cried all the way home. We had to leave, and I cried all the way home. So once we finally started treatment, we were referred for ICSI. So we went straight to ICSI. It kind of started off fine, and I was really excited to be getting going. I know some people feel nervous, but we were really excited. I felt like this was going to give us a baby because at this point we've been trying for 4 years. So everything seemed to be going fine until it was near egg collection, and then I started to produce quite a lot of follicles, and it turned out I'd overstimulated and was at risk of OHSS. So I was told at that point that I probably have to have everything frozen, and I was really worried about that. And you know what it's like when you're waiting every month, and I'd already got it planned out that I'd have my egg collection this date, my transfer this date, and I'd be pregnant by this date. So it was really difficult to cope with that. And by the time I had my egg collection, I was really unwell. Actually, I was really poorly. And they told me, yeah, there was no way I'd have to have a freeze-all of all my embryos. So we'd got 45 follicles, 30
Wow.
eggs. And 15 fertilised, and we ended up with 2 blastocysts. And yeah, I begged the consultant to do my transfer anyway, but obviously he said no, quite rightly. And I had to then, well, I was really ill with the OHSS after that, and it took me a couple of months before my body had kind of got back to normal to be able to have my transfer. I had my first transfer again, thought this was it. I just thought that that would be it. We'd have a baby. And unfortunately, it didn't work. And I was absolutely devastated. I think that was the first point for me that I realized this might never happen because I always thought IVF was my backup plan. And then when it didn't work, I really thought, I don't know how I'm going to pick myself back up again to go through it again. I just couldn't see how I could do that. So a friend of mine recommended a life coach that she'd seen, not for fertility, but just generally.
Yeah.
And I went to see her, and she was great. She was really helpful in just giving me coping tools and things like that. So that was the July. We found out on our 5th wedding anniversary that it hadn't worked, and we thought it would do. So then it was the next January. I had to go back on the pill to regulate my cycles, which felt really counterproductive. And then it was the next January that I had my second transfer, which was our remaining blastocyst. And I used all the coping techniques that the coach had talked me through, and they just made such a difference. But when it came to the test, I was absolutely terrified again that it was going to be negative. I was convinced it wouldn't work. But we were waiting to make the call for the clinic, and the clinic actually called us and said, we can't leave you waiting any longer. It's positive. And then I asked if they were joking because I didn't believe them. And luckily it was a positive for us, and I was terrified throughout my pregnancy, but I did go on to have my son, who's now 8. He's just gone 8. I know. But as I say, I was so terrified all the way through. I'd convinced myself I'd never have a baby, and I think it really affected me all the way through my pregnancy. So for me, I'd realised there was a lack of support while we were going through it. I didn't know anybody who even struggled, let alone gone through treatment. So I didn't know anyone I could talk to. So while I was going through it, I had quite a stressful job. I worked as a senior buyer doing the cards and gifts for Marks and Spencer's. And I just felt like I wanted to do something different and give something back. And I wanted to set up support groups because I just felt there wasn't anything there that was helpful. So sorry, I don't know if you wanted a short version of my journey.
Well, you've said so many things, and I want to go back. I want to pick in several things that you've mentioned in the beginning when you said it took you 3 years to seek help. I'm thinking that is actually the average that it takes for people to realize that something is wrong. So you're not alone in that, but I think in a way it is a bit shocking because probably GPs, they should probably trigger these conversations with patients as well. When they understand that people are trying to conceive, they could start a conversation and ask, have you thought about having children? Are you trying? What has your GP done? Has he helped you in any way, or what kind of testing did he do?
No, that from what I remember, it's obviously quite a lot of years since we went through. We're talking 14 years since we started our journey. No, they weren't helpful at all. I think there was a very limited understanding. I think it was almost basic tests, and then we were referred, and there was nothing from us getting the information that we were being referred. I'm not even sure how many tests they did or whether it was just straight referral to the clinic where we had a few tests and then went on the waiting list, but there was no support at all in that point. I think there's so much more awareness now, and I think that's why people probably are starting to wait less time, because there's more awareness of the time that you should be going if it hasn't happened within 2 years, or a year if you're older. But no, there was no support at all from the GP, and it was something. I mean, all through the process, I felt it was very limited, but certainly from the GP, and it's something I feel quite strongly about, that support needs to start sooner.
Absolutely. And you said that when you went to have treatment, you almost had that feeling that the treatment is like the golden bullet that was going to work 100%.
Yeah. And again, I think part of that was a lack of understanding on our part as well, that we hadn't done research on it. We didn't know about it. I mean, even when I went for my egg collection, I didn't really know what I was going for, and I was quite glad in the end that I hadn't. But I think part of me didn't want to be almost over. I don't know why, but I felt like maybe I was overreacting if I'd researched, if I'd done ovulation sticks, even though I was tracking it on an app. So I definitely was. I knew exactly when I thought the right time was. So I was tracking it. But yeah, I believe that IVF would work. I didn't know anything about the success rates or anything like that. And I know a lot of people feel anxious about getting started, but for me, I just felt like this hasn't worked. By this point, it'd been 4 years, and I thought, well, nothing's happened in 4 years. So for me, I've got a better chance having treatment. And also, the thing that got me through while I was going there was thinking, I could be in hospital for something like treatment for cancer, for something that was, life-threatening. Mm-hmm. Actually, I made something that's really positive and is hopefully going to give me a child. And it really helped me kind of get through it, that kind of thought that it could work. But yeah, by the time I'd had my first failed cycle, it was much harder to see it as that. And I think, I don't think there's the awareness that IVF isn't the backup plan that you think it is.
Yeah, that sometimes it just doesn't work. At least in the first round, they say we need round 3 on average 3, isn't it? And you also mentioned that you had ICSI, so I imagine there was like a male component there contributing to your challenges as well. How was that? How was the challenge of coping, in a couple with your own struggles, and of course your husband's is trying to cope as well?
Yeah, so we were referred to ICSI because of male factor. And when we started treatment, I think it showed that I was slightly polycystic. I hadn't kind of got signs for PCOS, but I did react as though I had it. So the issue to start with was male factor. But what we found really helped was not placing blame on it, on whose side it was. And I'd say this to a lot of people I speak to now, whoever's side it is, don't place blame, because it just leads to resentment. It's a joint problem together, whether it's male factor or female factor. You're trying to have a baby together, and it's really important to see it as a joint problem so that you're not blaming one another when you're struggling. We talked bits about it as we were going through it, but I was very much, I think we coped very differently. I'm quite an emotional person anyway, so I was just crying most of the time. And my husband felt very much that he had to be strong for me, so he didn't want to be telling me how he was feeling and putting it onto me. And he felt guilty that it was male factor, so he felt guilty that he was watching me going through this invasive procedure. And then when I was so ill after my first cycle, he felt really bad about that. But we did have separate people to speak to, so people didn't really understand what I was going through and why I felt the way I did. But he spoke to some of his friends who were great. They were a great source of support, and some of mine were as well. But I'd say the biggest thing was not placing blame and seeing it as a joint issue rather than it being his issue or my issue.
Yeah, and you said you mentioned friends, and some people understand, some people might, ask questions or make less sensitive comments. And I imagine at the time you didn't have Instagram or Facebook or anything like that. So did you have any support from the outside of other people who were going through it?
Nothing at all, which is why I felt so strongly about what I do now. There was no one. I had friends who were sympathetic and who would ask how we were getting on and was I okay, but those same friends were the ones who then would sit either side of me heavily pregnant, complaining about how they felt. So although they were sympathetic and would say, "Oh, how are you getting on?" They couldn't empathize with me. They didn't understand the depth of what I was going through. And certainly after my failed cycle, I just felt like nobody understood why I was so devastated about something I'd never had. It took me so long to get over it, but people just couldn't understand why I just kept crying and why I was so upset, because they didn't understand that. I think if you've not struggled with infertility and you've not been through this, I think it's very hard to understand that, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's incredibly difficult for other people to understand, and I think when we haven't processed things enough in our minds, it can also be difficult for us to understand that sometimes people's comments doesn't come from a bad place.
Yeah. I think a lot of the time people don't understand how to help and they say things that they think will be helpful. But I think when you're in that place, it doesn't come across that way. And yeah, you're not always thinking rationally. Um, and I think nowadays there's so much more out there. I think with Instagram, Facebook, the charities like Fertility Network, things like that, there's so many different people talking about how it feels. It's normalizing it. And for anybody on the outside, they can find out more information. Whereas when you're in it, you may be not in a space where you can talk about it and explain the support you need to have the feeling. But they can access that from other people. But also the community is so big now that it's great that there's somebody there. There's always somebody there who will understand, who's been through a similar thing and can validate and normalize what you're going through.
And Sarah, once you got pregnant, I imagine there was a lot of anxiety as well around it, because you said you had your second transfer, you didn't think it was going to work, and then of course the result was positive. How was it to be pregnant after so many years?
It was amazing, but terrifying as well. So it, I was constantly worried. I was convinced something was going to happen to the baby right up until having him. Um, but also there was the feeling of, I know I'm really, really lucky, so I should be enjoying this, but also I'm really worried. So I was quite anxious. I had a lot of additional scans just to make sure. I had a 6-week scan at the clinic where I went. And then after that, I had some bleeding and I was just terrified that something had happened. And I called the unit and as supportive as they are, and they're lovely, and I run the support group for them now. The lady I spoke to said, well, if you're miscarrying, there's nothing we can do about it. And I was driving to work, I was on the hands-free, and I was just like, oh, I'd rung for some kind of reassurance, really, that don't worry, this happens a lot, come on in, we can scan you. And it was just a case of, well, you'll have to wait 2 weeks till your next scan, and if you have, you have. And it was awful. I spent 2 weeks terrified. I went into my scan convinced that something had happened, that I'd lost the baby. And yeah, as much as I was so happy and so thankful that it happened, I was just terrified because I think I'd convinced myself it wouldn't happen. And unfortunately, I think kind of this journey robs you of even of that joy as well, because, and I know that a lot of people say the same thing, that you worry all the way through because you've convinced yourself it won't happen.
And now you have your beautiful boy, but you also have a girl, don't you?
Yes, I do.
And how was it trying for the second one? Were you expecting it to be difficult, or how was it?
I'll be completely honest, and I feel guilty in saying this, but we weren't even trying for my daughter. My son was 14 months and we'd just moved house. We just assumed we'd have to go back through it again. We were just convinced, that we would. I mean, I went for my 6-week checkup after having my son and they were talking about contraception. I just kind of laughed and said, it's taken us 6 years and 2 rounds of IVF to have him. We'd like another. I don't need to go on anything. And, I think we'll be going through it again. And because I breastfed my son till he was 1, I'd only had a couple of periods. I decided to retrain as a coach, and so I just didn't think it would happen. I was a week late before I even tested, and when I did, I left it and wandered off and thought, well, it's not going to be positive. I've never seen a positive test, so I just kind of assumed it wouldn't. And it kind of took me by surprise a bit, really, because they're both are miracles, because I don't believe without having IVF we'd have had my daughter either. And yeah, so it was a bit of a shock, and to the point where I felt like my son was the centre of my world. I'd assumed we'd just go through treatment again at some point when we were ready. So it was a bit of kind of a shock to the system because I'd never ever expected it. As I said, I left the test and I wandered off and thought, it's going to be negative. Every test I've done has always been negative, so it won't be positive. And Yeah, so she's our second little miracle, and she's 6 now, so
Yeah.
it's quite a long time ago. But yeah, I think we know we would have just gone through it again if that hadn't have
Yeah.
happened. That was the plan, that we'd just get to a point when we were ready, and then we just have to try again. So after all those years, I don't know what the difference was, and I almost feel guilty, kind of saying about it.
But I think it's just so incredible the way our bodies work. And I mean, there's almost no reason or justification of why it happened that quickly, isn't it? If it was a male factor, it could be that the sperm maybe had improved over that period. But
That's it. It's almost even more strange, because the issue before was male factor, that sort of nothing had changed there. Whether it's just, I don't know, whether the timing wasn't right before, whether my cycles were out and we were never timing it right, but in all those years it never ever happened.
yeah.
It is weird whether your body knows that it's done it before. And I do think the fact, as much as you don't want to be told stay positive, it'll happen, stop thinking about it and it'll happen, because it's just that saying that to somebody who's desperately trying just isn't helpful. But I do believe that part of it probably was I wasn't working a stressful job where I was working till midnight every night, most nights when I
Mm.
was trying to conceive. I'd been working crazy hours. I was in a much better place. I wasn't thinking about getting pregnant. We just moved house. I think my emotional state was so much better than I was in for all those years of trying, and probably my health as well, in that I wasn't working crazy hours in a really stressful job.
Yeah, and our emotional health always impacts on our physical health as well, doesn't it? The way we eat and the exercise levels, the way we treat our body changes when we are under stress. So,
Yeah.
and so it was very quick for you that you decided, once you had your baby, to give back to this amazing community, wasn't it? Is it
Yeah,
Was it like a calling that you felt that you couldn't ignore?
definitely. Even when I was pregnant, I knew I wanted to do something different. I remember my brother-in-law works at a school, and he worked in a preschool, and he was talking about how the kids felt about going home about Christmas time, about school not being in at Christmas time, and how they just felt more supported and loved when they're at school. And I just thought, nobody should feel like that. And I just thought, it was such a worthwhile thing he was doing. And I thought, I'm making money for shareholders. I want to do something where I'm making a difference. And I was very much felt that I needed to do something for people who were struggling, because I'd had no support whatsoever. There was no support groups. There was nothing really. There was probably stuff, but I just didn't know where it was at the time. But no, I definitely did. So when my son was 9 months, I did like a 2-day coaching taster to see whether I liked it. And I literally signed up that day, and I started doing all my courses. And I did 2 diplomas, so personal development coaching and then a youth coaching. And I'd literally said, oh, I can't keep doing both of these together. I'm struggling to do both, and I need to do one then the other. And then that weekend I found out I was pregnant with my daughter, and I was like, I need to get both of them finished now before the baby arrives. So yeah, I retrained, and then once I'd had her and I was able to, she was about 9 months, I think, when I set up the support groups, and that was the first thing I did. I wanted to set up support groups. I went to the clinic where we'd had treatment, and I said, I want to set up a support group. Can I link it to your clinic, or would you like me to? And they said, yeah, definitely. But no, I'd made that decision very quickly, that I wanted to do something where I was giving back and helping people and making a difference to their lives, really. And this was what I wanted to do, help people who were struggling and going through what I'd gone, so that they didn't feel as alone as I did
Mm-hmm.
going through it.
And it's such a beautiful thing to do, isn't it? Because it was so difficult for you to have your babies, that to and it stays with you forever, I think.
It does. Yeah. I think this is probably one of the, when I talk about what we went through, if I talk too deeply, it still upsets me. And I still have that feeling when people make pregnancy, you know, when I hear pregnancy announcements, I still get that. And it's not that, you know, sort of I'm wanting more children. It's just that so many years of that happening. I think some of it is, well, it happened so easy. Um, you know, it's really difficult, and it does stay with you. And I think that having gone through it myself, people feel, and you'll know this as well, people tend to open up and feel that they can talk openly and honestly because they won't be judged. And I think it's really important to provide that safe space where people know that you've been through it, and that when they say something that they'd never say to anybody else for fear of being judged, that you'll just say, loads of people feel that, or it's okay to feel that, because they know you know exactly what it feels like yourself to go through it. And I think it does make a difference having that personal experience, doesn't it?
It does. I think 100%. And you published your IVF planner. Do you want to tell us a bit about how you came up with that idea, and what can people expect of your IVF planner?
I will. I haven't even brought it with me. I sat in the kitchen and I didn't even think to bring it with me. You can see it on my page. It's something I'd wanted to do for ages. I'd had the idea, but because I was kind of just working on my own and I was trying to kind of start my business, running the support groups, it was one of those things I kept thinking, I'd love to do it, I'd love to do it. And it was very much, I wanted to give some people something that was very much like a coaching program in a book. So not just a journal that you could write your feelings in, but something that would help. And a lot of what I do, the support groups, the coaching, was I wanted to provide a safe space, but I wanted it to be in a way that people could move forward and make change and take control. I didn't want to, because I looked at counselling as well, and I wanted it to be something where it was more proactive. People could take action to feel better, because that's what I needed. So I wanted to create a journal where they could write things down, but also where they could work through some of the things that they were feeling and start to take control and take action. So for a while, I kept thinking, I really want to do it. And then I just thought, I need to do this. Partly because I thought, if I don't do it, someone else might do it. And then I'll just be really like annoyed that I haven't done it, and I really feel like it would be helpful to people. So then I sat down and I just started writing it basically, and I just went through so many different activities and things and narrowed it down, and it's all based on kind of what I needed and what people in my support group need. So I hear so many people talking about different factors and different parts of treatment that they struggled with, and just different parts of their life where they struggled with. It's all based on that information where people really struggle, and I wanted it to be something that would help them take control, but also help them feel stronger whilst going through treatment as well.
And it's beautiful, and it's pink. I've seen it.
It is, yeah. It's very girly, which is like me, and yeah, I wanted it to be something that people enjoyed writing in as well. I love like stationery, and I wanted it to be something where people would enjoy writing in it. And the feedback I get is really great, and I love that, because the whole point is that it helps people through this really difficult time, and I hope that's what it's doing for people.
And we have here Kirsty saying, I agree that outsiders don't have a clue what we go through and our bodies go through, let alone understanding infertility. And that is so true. And that's why this community is so amazing, and that's why we need each other.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's just really validating when, say, like in my support group, somebody posts something and so many people reply saying, I felt the same, don't worry, I felt the same. You know, even things like feeling guilty that their best friends announce that they're pregnant and they feel really jealous of them. You know, you wouldn't feel that you could say that to a lot of people, but everybody in the community understands what that's like. And I think having that network around you, if you don't necessarily have it in your own support group or your friends or family, is really important, isn't it?
Yeah. And Kirsty is also asking here if our app is free to download. I think it's about my app she's talking about. So the Enhanced Fertility app is free, and it's all about testing male and female fertility so that people can identify what problems they might have. So, you know, like you, Sarah, you were saying it took 3 years. Research says it takes around 3.2 years. So our app is all about testing online and with at-home blood tests to see what problems you have. And yeah, so, and it's free to download. So yeah, feel free from all the app stores. And
It's great having that, isn't it? Because I think if your GP is a bit of a gatekeeper and saying no, you need to wait a certain amount of years, then people may be missing things that are vital, and it's important to start treatment earlier than they'd have realised. And then it's really difficult if they get to the point where they haven't realised there was anything wrong. They go for treatment and they're at a point where it's very difficult because their egg reserves are low, and actually if they'd been 2 years earlier, they'd have, maybe had a better chance. So I think it's great providing that service for them.
yeah, time matters a lot. I mean, you started trying early, but a lot of women start trying later in their 30s, isn't it? Waiting those
Yeah.
3 or 4 years until they access a clinic is just too long.
That's it. We were 26 when we started trying. So, now that seems really young. I've just gone 40, so that seems really young. But it's, we were really starting. We just didn't realize there was anything wrong.
Yeah, and Kirsty's saying that she has no tubes due to ectopic pregnancies, but have 2 kids from FET, but miscarriage twice. Yeah, so it's just really, really challenging journeys.
Yeah.
And Sarah, where can people find your IVF planner?
So you can buy it at www.ivfpositivityplanner.com. And then you'll be able to see my Instagram account, which is at IVF Positivity Planner, where I share lots of information and support. I'm doing an advent calendar of support in December. So the 24 days leading up to Christmas, there will be support tips for coping. So I put lots of things on there. I've also got a free Facebook support group that anybody's welcome to join. It's called TTC Support UK. It's free. It's a closed group. There's lots of amazing people. I think there's about 1,200 people in it now. So it's, it's a great source of support there as well. And I think it's having those different places, isn't it, where you can access that.
Sarah, thank you so much for sharing your story. I absolutely love catching up with you, and hopefully we'll see each other again soon at the fertility show or the fertility
Hopefully.
conference. I think that will definitely happen soon. But
yeah, I'm hoping so. Hopefully, is it May next year, the fertility show?
yes.
So
Yes.
I'm definitely, if it's on, I'm going to be coming down. So we'll definitely organise to have a coffee because we never sort of get a chance to actually sit and have a coffee together, do we? It's always a bit busy.
Yes.
So we'll plan it. But thank you so much for asking me as well. It's lovely to chat to you always.
Thank you, Sarah.
Take care. You too. And I'll see you soon. Have a lovely weekend.
Bye.
Take care. Bye. Bye.